This time in the BK, we're one-on-one with a woman who capped her high school, deferred university, worked for a couple of Scottish barons, caught her flatmate's heart in London, all while navigating to the true fashion of her own. G'day ladies and gents, welcome to the Brand Konnect. I'm Matt Jai and we're coming to you from sunny Sydney, Australia. That's right, Australia, down under. This week on the BK we're catching up with a good friend of mine, Tereza Berkemeier. How are you, Tereza?
I'm good, Matt. How are you?
You're really good. Berkemeier, that's an interesting surname. It's not what you grew up with. Where did you pick up that surname?
So my husband's family are Dutch-German. They're from The Hague. I took on his surname. It was very hard to give up Callaghan. I'm from New Zealand and I have an Irish heritage. But yeah, that's how I have my surname.
A Kiwi girl, or a Maori girl, I should say, Māori, with an Irish surname. How did that come about?
My family are from a very remote town in the North Island, the Eastern Cape. It's called Waiho Bay. We only have 300 residents there. They're mainly a very self-sufficient community. And it was so remote until one of my family decided to make a movie on it called Boy. I'm not sure if
Wow, that's a kind of a big hit film. Did that resonate a lot with you? Because obviously you came to Australia and watching the film Boy, did it sort of make you think, wow, what did I come to Australia for?
The movie director, so him and I have a similar history. We grew up in Caucasian communities.
With us Anglo people.
With you beautiful Anglo people who love me dearly.
Damn straight we do.
Yes, and so he grew up in Wellington and he lives in LA, and obviously I grew up a little bit in New Zealand and I came over in the early 1980s. And we just have a similar story, that's all.
Awesome.
And yeah.
So it would have resonated pretty strongly with you than the actual film, you know, because you know his background to conjure up a film like that, and you know that, you know, you came from that same township, and obviously you both, you know, ended up and your family, your heritage is there.
The film, if anyone's seen it, it's about a boy it's actually about a relationship with his father. The East Coast, they're a rural area which didn't have many Caucasian. It's changed now. The whole demographic has changed. And
so it was primarily Indigenous?
Yes, primarily Indigenous. And we also had a lot of our grandparents had gone to the Second World War and luckily they returned. But from that they suffered post-traumatic stress disorder, which wasn't something that was diagnosed in those days. We were lucky they returned actually because we inherited all this Māori land because of the treaty. And these homesteads, including my own, homestead is actually called Dublin after my great-great-grandfather. And it sits on top of a cliff top and looks out to a mountain that was named after my great-great-grandfather.
Sounds absolutely inviting.
Oh, it is stunning. I mean, people see photos of it all the time, and I haven't had the liberty to take any of my closest friends from Australia there yet. There is one girlfriend who I just trust with this personal side of me that I want to take her.
It's pretty sacred,
next
I guess,
year.
to you, you know, and your family.
Yeah, you know what? It's pretty sacred, and it's also such a simplistic way of life, but very rich in the lifestyle that it is. It would be quite disheartening if I took someone there and they saw
Trash
that there's basically said, "Oh, there's not much here. You don't have running water." You know, this is. I speak for myself in my own homestead. And but that's what makes it stunning. It
sounds like a really humble place, and from humble beginnings, you know, come great things. Obviously, the film Boy did really well.
Yeah.
You know, for you to come to Australia, you've obviously transformed from that girl from, you know, New Zealand to, you know, a pretty well an Australian woman in many ways, you know,
yes.
within your walk the way you are.
Yep.
How was it when you first came to Australia?
When I came over in the early 1980s, it was very much a primarily Caucasian community because I moved to Harbord. And everything about hardboard became my biggest influence. It conditioned the way that I perceive things. I had a great upbringing. Like, I wasn't the strongest swimmer, but the surfing lifestyle and like summer days I can remember on Curly and Freshy Beach were very much a part of my upbringing. And in winter, I played a lot of sports. So I was involved in netball, basketball. And weekends were spent, if I wasn't playing sport, walking across to Hardboard Park and watching Hardboard or Valley United. I lived in a 2-bedroom flat with my parents in Waiadra Avenue, and behind me were the Hines, the Griggs and my cousins. They all lived in the next street. And then I had the Knoxes straight across Hardboard Park for me. The Benroses lived across from Hardboard School. They were a part of my life also, although they went to the local Catholic school. And then we had the Forsters, who lived in a hairdressing salon. I'm sure many people from Hardboard will remember that. All these families became integral to my upbringing and really shaped how I view the world. I took everything that I loved about my upbringing to the different countries that I went to live in. So I went to the States. I also lived in the UK for a while. I was in Cape Town in 1999 in a place called Newlands. That was the last year that Nelson Mandela, his presidency was. So there's been some very prominent moments during my life where my upbringing has gone with me everywhere, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, being, a woman of colour and, being there in South Africa when Mandela was president of South Africa and obviously shaped that movement to get him into presidency and then for him to reign over the country, or rule it in a fair and just manner. How was that for you?
So what I had first learned about Mandela and his wife in the anti-apartheid, I probably had to get used to some of the things that I'd seen because there was violence used during that movement. Having visited Robben Island where he was in jail and knowing that he was actually physically there in Cape Town, it gave a perspective on a man that was incarcerated that probably gained wisdom over the years, took his experiences and thought, right, what am I going to do with this?
I'm going to fight the fight, right, so to speak?
Yeah, but in a
positive, humble way.
Yeah. In a very humble and gentle way. And, not all things that happened during the presidency were positive for the South Africans. Like, I think they opened up the borders and then there became like different various problems with that. I was also staying with one of my closest friends and his family, and they had maids, and I had to try and be comfortable with that because this is a way of life. And also comfortable, like she was cleaning up around us, which is usually what I find because that's what I do for my own family and friends. I love the servitude part of any social situation.
Is that your language of love, or do you think it's from your culture?
It's definitely my language of love. A little bit from my culture. I do admit that I come from a long line of women that are like treaty negotiators, whether they're like grassroots activists to academics. And I always found when I watched them speak at all their causes, I used to think as a teenager, because I was quite relaxed, I always just think, aren't they exhausted? They're always fighting a fight. Like,
come on, Auntie, what are you doing? Is that what it's like in your mind?
Yeah, it's like that. Aren't you tired? But then I realised, they have a life and passionate commitment, and it's only now in these later years I appreciate that a bit more, and then it explains some of the things that I've been involved in over the last few years. I like, how did I find myself in this space? Oh, I've inherited that voice. I've got a mixture of the servitude love language, and then a little bit when I guess because I think my aunts and my mum and my uncles have fought so hard. Like, if there is a time to speak up. And I think I had that opportunity when I went back to our little town in November when my uncle passed away. And they were having this meeting where they invited all the families to have a conversation with the Fishermen's Club, which is it's a rich enterprise.
There,
yeah.
Because it's coastal, right? And
yes.
Fishing is the way of life and the way of food, the way of economy and the way of living, probably.
Yes, well, yes. And this is owned, the members of this club pay $300 each to be a part of the club, yet none of that money is given back to the land that we've, with grace, given them. with no requirement of payment. It's for their enjoyment. But now there are little things like their jet boats and everything are affecting the
marine life,
the water, the
ecology, I guess, the way that it all moves there.
My family that depends so much on seafood as food, it's impacting the numbers
and the quality probably.
And the quality, I think, yeah.
Because obviously there's products that are coming, byproducts of the fuels that are coming into the food chain that go from the bigger fish to the little fish, and then we ingest it, or they ingest it, I should say.
Yeah, that's right. Apart from the environmental impact of like motorboats and things like that, it's also being shed from our synthetic clothes into the ocean. So we need to. I feel like we need to all be diligent and look after our oceans and seas, and this is why I think I was so blessed that I came from that environment to this with all our beaches. These are some of the most beautiful beaches in the world. I mean, I've travelled the world. I went to Italy and people were saying, these are beautiful beaches. Really? They're rock platforms.
Isn't it amazing? I went to Manly after living in Europe and spent a lot of time in Hawaii and go to the States, and I literally posted up at my parents' house for a couple of days, had a surf at Manly and looked at the white sand and went, this is probably the best beach I've been to on the planet.
Yeah.
And you look at, you go around to, Shelley Beach and all that, and it's like Spain or whatever.
I know.
And it's just white sand.
That's right, yeah.
Not heavy sand and good sand and clean.
I guess that's a perception of what they thought that, a beach is. And even when I was in the UK going to some of their best beaches, there were still a lot of rocks and stones. I'm having a laugh now.
And everything else though, isn't it,
Yeah, but that's what they have to hand, and that's what their enjoyment is. So
we're so blessed. Honestly,
with everything from Palm Beach right down to even I can even say as far as the Spit and beyond. I don't know. I felt like when I returned, I underappreciated all that was available. And to be honest, I never did the Manly to Spit walk until I returned from the UK, and I can understand the beauty of it.
What were you doing in the UK? Like, what took you, say, from South Africa to the UK? Were you again on some inner quest to, because I guess when you, for those who, aren't from Australia, we're at the bottom of the planet, like literally New Zealand's below us. As far as in geography, that's the only thing. Maybe in sport, cricket.
Yeah.
There you go.
Come on, Australia. I'm saying this for my husband. Pick up your game. Make it a competition, all right?
Go the All Blacks. They're pretty good. Go the Wallabies. But, deep down, obviously, we're at the bottom of the planet. And then you get this vast, sort of feeling to get a ticket and get out of here.
Yeah.
Is that what it was like for you? Because I remember that was like for me as a filmmaker. I just wanted to travel. I had to get out of Australia. It wasn't good enough. Manly, it wasn't. I'd done everything there. But I came home and it was the best place. What was it? What took you to the UK?
So I think in the late 1990s, it became like a rite of passage for a lot of my friends, for a lot of people on the northern beaches. So we were all going over to do our 2-year visas. When I got to London, I was staying with one of my best friends, Kate Tracy, in a house we call Lily Road. I stayed with her for a little while before I moved on. But then I knew the McKellar girls were over in Munster Road. The Stella girls were at St. Louisa's at Westminster. We had our Northern Beaches community nearby.
And phone numbers and email addresses, I guess.
Yeah,
no Facebook then, was there?
No, there was no. Phones were just starting to come in. And a lot of us...
So did you meet at the pub or something? How did you all connect?
Well, that's funny. I think I missed the first thing that everyone went to. It's called the Pink Palace in Greece. So I missed out on that somehow, but everyone met up. And they, of course, there's like, they were the, what do you call it, Antipodean pubs. So it was easy to meet up. And that was that stage. And then we had another stage in Influx where Matty Astle, Justin Barlett, Sean Hill came in, and then there was another layer, and then our community was just huge in London. I always thought that I would be going to, like Shepherd's Bush and the Redback and things like that, but we the group that I was with, we were going to these really big London clubs. It was just the variety. It was we had the option to go to the walkabouts. That's what it was, the walkabouts in the church. We had that option.
Sounds like an Indigenous name right there, doesn't it? Well, go and
Yeah.
walkabout.
Yeah. And actually, when I was in London, that's what my first trip was to South Africa with this group. So that's how that South Africa came about. And following that, I ended up living there for 7 years. And some of my biggest experiences, because I actually went to Joondalup Watkins. If people know her, she was like a deportment icon. She only actually passed away a couple of months ago. I had deferred uni for what I thought would be a year, so I could pick up some admin skills so I could take them over. That was the plan, to go to London with that. And I went to London and I was able to use those skills. I started working in these huge investment banks. And the money was really good because we, as backpackers, we set up limited companies so we could get paid more by the rate. That sounds a bit dodgy, doesn't it? But, it was very
you
legal.
worked the system, didn't you? So who taught you that? That's a good hustle.
Thank you to the Queen. And I saw the extremities of poverty and extreme wealth. Like we were working for this Scottish bank called Flemings. The actual family were working in Flemings as well.
The Flemings family?
Yeah, the Flemings family. They had barons in their family who were working alongside us.
Barons?
Yes.
Did you have to call them baron? Were you saying,
no,
hey, baron?
We couldn't bring ourselves to call anyone baron. That was a joke.
I know. I met the guy who owned Steel once. Everyone called him Doctor. And I was his personal photographer in Australia for a couple of days.
Yeah.
And I ended up just calling him by his first name. And
Yeah.
he's like, do you want to have a beer? And I was like, yeah, sure. I'll have a beer with you. He was a normal guy. But everyone was going, oh, Doctor, we like this. And I was like, wait a second, this guy's for real. He's a normal guy. So you didn't call him barons?
No, the concept was a bit difficult, and he really he treasured his relationship with us, and he didn't want to be seen as not being on
real.
Yeah.
On equal grounding with everyone.
And mind you, we had, so my job there, my first job was to assist interns on the trading floor. So it was this frantic activity of everyone on the phones, and I remember just getting, watching them, or they could make thousands of pounds in one day and then lose hundreds of thousands in like 5 minutes.
That would have been such a bizarre scenario because, coming from Manly, and obviously, or should say Harbourwood, and growing up, in an apartment with your family.
Yeah.
And, in a everyday, you would have gone to Franklin's, I guess, as a kid,
Yeah, Franklin's and Grace Brothers, yes.
You know what I mean? That must have been bizarre to see those sort of losses happening.
I think that's when I learnt that there was definitely a separation between what I valued, what was value to me, and what was of little or more value to other people. I hadn't, this was my first experience with this demographic, right? So for a laid-back Northern Beaches girl, it was eye-opening. Equally, in saying that, these people took us in, they loved us as well. So you let the Northern Beaches magic spread around. We're friendly people.
And how did you end up, was that a career path you wanted to be in? Were you like, I want to be a banker, I want to learn about, what career path were you, sort of following at that stage in your career life?
Yeah, so at that stage, that was probably, I found myself in a career path that I felt I wasn't enjoying that much because I was getting a lot of PA roles and office management roles to these wealthy men. Nothing to say about the men. And
just boring.
Yeah.
For your intelligence.
Yeah. Oh, well, it was just, I didn't find it fulfilling. So I was on a bit of, after that, I had taken in between a job from Morgan Stanley and another big bank called Credit Lyonnais. I worked 8 months in Peckham, which is a predominantly black neighbourhood, and I worked in child protection there. So I learnt to do shorthand at Joondalup Watkins, and I was minuting all these child protection conferences and going into these big estates. There's one called the Aylesbury Estate, which is probably the biggest housing commission estate. These are little cities.
In the UK?
And in London.
Huge.
Where's
that one from? Like Africa, or what sort of, when you say, a black community,
yeah,
or a community of colour, really,
yeah,
to say it with today's, sort of
It's predominantly, it was predominantly a community colour, but there were a lot of white families as well. And that's when I began to understand and appreciate generational cycles, because these kids were just, by no fault of their own, were just living out their parents' lifestyles, which has become so ingrained, right?
Patterns.
It's just patterns happening over, and as much as they want to be helped and as much support that they could get, they weren't able to break these cycles. So,
well, it's a huge, sort of fundamental issue, I guess, of monkey see, monkey do, or that happened to me, and you start
modelling.
getting in the I don't know, I suppose complaining about your life and then passing that on to your kids.
Yeah,
it must have been amazing for you to see that at such scale over there.
At such scale, and also I think you learn to appreciate if people don't want to be helped, don't help them. They don't see, if they can't see anything wrong with their environment, then it's better to just let them and let them live. And one day, it might be a revelation to them that they might be able to do something different.
It's like drug addiction, right? A lot of people have to go through it, or alcoholism or gambling. They're going to go through it, lose their family, their home, their motor vehicle, their friends, and then go, wow, that was pretty boring when it comes down to it. Is that the sort of things that you've noticed that you've learnt from these sort of situations?
I just think that people need to have their own revelation. If you force or you preach and you feel like your beliefs and values are better than others, and just meet people where they're at, come alongside them and love them and just rain the love all over them. And, the people will honestly bloom under that. Like, even if you just have conversations, you're not going to see these people again. Just let someone leave your company more uplifted than when they first bumped into you. It's just like, I think it's just, for me, that's come from such appreciation and gratefulness where I've come from, not only from New Zealand, but especially from Harbord, because I've developed quite a resilience there. Because
you had to, I guess, right, back in the day?
Yeah, we had to. Though, I mean, I don't know how to describe it. We were quite from a era that where you didn't just discuss your insecurities and emotions. I didn't discover that was a thing until I actually met my flatmates in London. So when I heard one of my flatmates go, I actually feel insecure about this, I thought, that is not of my psyche. How would you admit that?
Australian?
Yes, he was Australian. And then I just realised, like, the way we grew up, we didn't really talk like that to each other. There's nothing wrong with that. I think too that, like, we were quite competitive in sport. When we had injuries, they weren't really injuries. We're still going to play. There was a edginess, rawness, grit about the people that I grew up with.
It formulated success in a way, didn't it? I mean, or just the ability just to push through it and go on.
That's right, yeah, develop some endurance. Most of us came from working class backgrounds. We thought that everyone lived the same way. And I think it developed a grit. It was also, we didn't have any boundaries, which worked well for us and against us in some ways. We didn't have any boundaries, so taking risks was just a part of life. I had no idea that you could actually measure risk until I was with my flatmates in London, and I loved the boys that were part of my palace. We called it the palace because it was contrary to a palace, actually. It was like a share house with 5 boys and 1 girl. It was, yeah.
A palais.
We do actually call it the palais because it was so not.
That's, Europe's got those unbelievable buildings and structures that I lived in Austria for a minute, and I just remember walking through the streets going, wow, this is like the Rocks but a million times bigger.
Yeah.
And it was like really cool. It's just got something in it, and that's why obviously you had that fundamental feeling of calling it the place the palace or the palais because of obviously Buckingham Palace.
Yeah, that was it was a very tongue-in-cheek when we first moved in together, because we actually moved in together at a place called Island Gardens because we were all working in banks around the Docklands area. So we weren't even catching tubes, we were catching light rail, the DLR. And it was just a different perception and something I had to get used to with the boys because they probably opened up a world for me, whereas I used to like these things when I was a kid, but I didn't really explore them because I loved the sports I was involved in. So they all loved art and theatre and all these things that I didn't get to explore until I was with them. So
a world away, total
world away, and we're all from Sydney. It was just for me, art and so forth wasn't a practical and hobby. And how does that fit in with me? Like long summer days down the beach. Yeah, that didn't work for me. But I do appreciate the experiences I had with them. As I shared with you before, I went to my first Sotheby's auction because my flatmate's family were auctioning a family painting there. And then on the same night, I witnessed a sale for an artwork called The Massacre of the Innocents by a painter called Rubens, and that went for £45 million.
That's such a big figure, isn't it? 45 million. It's
£45 million, and here's me just like trying to get my £10 for some tuna and bread for the week.
and you watched it go under the hammer? Yes.
So it was a what do you call it? A phone bid. But I was listening to the auctioneer. It's like say the amount, and if it sold for 45, then it must have been for 50 because they have to add the reserve on after that. So that was eye-opening, and then I just, kind of fell in love with all the art galleries and the museums because I just wanted to see.
Did you start painting after that, thinking you could be the next $45 million artist on the planet?
Yeah, but my Friday night paintings with a few drinks, I don't think they were cutting the mustard.
Sipping slop. So, coming back to Australia, did you follow the banking journey you're on, or were you taking shorthand in Indigenous communities, or what were you doing when you came back here?
Yeah, so I came back here because my father started having some health problems. We decided, Ewan and I, we actually got married in Chelsea.
That's the flatmate?
2003, yes. We got married in Chelsea and we came back.
Ewan?
Yes, Ewan.
Yeah, Ewan, you legend.
Sorry, did I just keep referring to him as the flatmate? I mean, the love of my life.
He's not a flatmate now, though, is he?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been, actually
love your life.
We've been married for 17 years. And
he's a good flatmate then.
Yes, he's a keeper. I came back, and the little Australian bank that I had never heard of that I was working at the time, called Macquarie, said that they had an opportunity coming back in Sydney, and it seemed to coincide with my dates, and they were wondering if I would be interested. And it was
that's a gift, isn't it?
Oh my goodness! When that opportunity came up, I was going back a little bit early before the actual contract started, which was good because I just needed to spend some time with family and friends, reconnect with everyone. And I came back to Sydney, and there was just like, I couldn't believe the perception of Macquarie Bank. It was little known in Europe, and then suddenly here it was like this bank that everyone held in high regard. And I worked to create a business unit to create their first credit cards, and I was the assistant for Julian Potter, who's an amazing man. Because of that, I became involved in marketing, and they said, can we send you back to uni if you like? It wasn't like, you better get back to uni. And at first I thought, oh no, that's a long time of studying and working together. But they encouraged me. They paid for me, supported the whole way, even though redundancies happened in 2007, and I was part of that. They fulfilled and honoured their word with everything, with my studies, and they said, knowing where you're going to go from here is going to be great for your career. So my first fashion experience was managing the L'Oreal Melbourne Fashion Festival in Macquarie Bank. I met people there and thought, oh, I want to be surrounded by these creators. I think I might take a pathway if I can. And the redundancy happened at a good time because I even adopted the Macquarie culture.
Previously, I spent time working alongside a few guys from Macquarie, and my stepdad worked there, and their ethics and the way they work through business modelling, it just makes sense, right?
It does. And I was a part of an amazing marketing team, and there weren't a lot of no, there weren't any mums, to be honest. We became fixed on what we thought would be a long term with Macquarie. And the redundancy probably happened at a good time for me because then I started to think about children. My husband really wanted children at that time, and I was at a good age to have children. So
you were good to go.
Yeah. Well, I better be truthful. So I wasn't good to go mentally.
Okay.
But physically, I probably needed to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that would be the best time.
And what a gift that must have been. I mean, to become a parent, it's the greatest thing ever, right?
Yeah.
In many ways, you know. Not saying those who don't have kids aren't incredible people, but, you know, to become a parent, your responsibility and your understanding, I guess, of what the common man is and what your parents have done, it's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah. It's yeah, my kids, everything. I have to admit, I had to grow into that motherhood role. My own mother's she's very independent, and that's what I saw. Like she modelled that to me, and so are all my aunts. They're very, very independent. So, and they've always been, they've always worked. So they were always the career woman or just working all the time. So when I became a mum, I actually had to match. Well, like it took time to align my mindset with my husband's because
he was ready to be a father.
Yeah,
and wear the pants, wear the belt of the father, right?
Yeah, and he had a mum and that nurtured them very much. I thought I was going to have babies and go straight back to work. And when you're in the reality of it, you're like, oh gosh, I'm going to have to really surrender that thought for the time being, right? Because if Ewan was just like starting his career as well, they need support.
The husband or the kids?
Whoever is working the most in the household, and the kids come along with it. And then over the years, I became a mum. I didn't know that I was going to become because I didn't think I was going to be so involved in their school. Yeah, I'm very much involved in their school. I guess that is a requirement of the school. My plans, and I'm very lucky to have a business actually because I don't know how it's worked out around the kids, but they're my priority. They're my legacy. So I need to steward over my life.
To have a business and to be a parent is actually a lot better, I think, beneficial than being an employee and being a parent.
Yeah.
Because you can time manage things you just couldn't do if you're on an hourly sort of situation, 9 to 5. Yeah,
you're right. You're right, actually, because I've had a couple of contract jobs where the various banks have said, can you come and work for a couple of months? And it just hasn't worked. The time, the scheduling, the expectations has not worked out around what we need to do. And
the kids need the support.
Yeah.
That's it, isn't it?
Well, you know, if my strongest memory is if I'm like 5 to 10 years old, then my children are in that at the moment, and I want to give them the best memories.
My mate said the other day, because I do daddy daycare 2 days a week, and he said the other day, he goes, mate, doing daddy daycare, you know, you won't know it now and your son won't remember it.
Yeah.
But your bond through the life will just be incredible with your child because they'll always trust you.
Yes.
And that's such a fundamental, that trust no one like that, I really believe is the pinnacle of success in anything.
Yeah.
To have that with your child from a foundational point of view, incredible. And you had that, right?
Yeah. It's also knowing, if you're making that commitment to kids, say, I really feel the way I am with my partner and my family was the commitment shown to me as a kid by my parents and my uncles and my aunts and my grandparents. Like you knew that was foremost for them. They were going to work out life all around you.
Is the Maori culture really, you know, it's a Polynesian culture, part of the Polynesian Triangle, right? New Zealand,
Yeah.
Tahiti,
Yeah.
Hawaii.
I'm not sure if it's part of that triangle.
Okay.
You might be schooling me.
Yeah. From what I gather, it is. But the closeness of family, is it huge? Is it everything?
Family is core. So that's another thing I had to get used to. So when I moved to Australia, mateship is core. So for me to try and work out that, it's not that they don't put their family second. It's just that when and I found as I get older, like I have that real do or die attitude for my girlfriends. It's like we ride or die together. And then I felt like, as I'm getting older, my kids need attention. My husband needs attention. So it's not, I can't run as much as I could to be with my girlfriends in certain life events. And I really had to work that out and go, what do you say yes to? What do you say no to? So in order to say yes to the things that are important.
Saying no is a very important word to know to how to use.
Yeah.
It's instrumental for your life, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, you just got to, you set the boundaries for you and your family, right? And you what you permit or let into your family's little culture, you and your partner get to make those huge decisions. And in the same sense, I don't want to overthink it either. I want my kids to have a fun upbringing, and I also want to be my husband and I to be fun together, because it's very different from before kids to when you have them, right?
It's a long journey. I mean, anyone who thinks, ending up having a child with someone, I'm just going to have a child with someone, well, you do that and you separate. It's a tough journey for both you and child and your partner, but the togetherness thing, it's a long journey, and I'm only second time in, but second marriage, but first child, and I'm aware of the obligation I have to my family. It's huge.
Yeah, it's massive. And you know what? I'm going to say it's massive for men. There's no manual. There's no education. You have to actually learn on the job. So when you're the head of your house,
hunting and gathering.
You do. And I'm not taking away from my girlfriends that are the head, like the financial heads of the house. But our men need all the greatest support. And I've seen, so my sister-in-law, how she supports my brother, oh my gosh, I can learn so much from her. But that's very integral part of her upbringing. She has a close-knit Italian family. Family is first. It's something that you need to commit to. And if things change along the way, that's okay, because everyone's just learning.
Everything, isn't it? I mean, that's one of the most unconditional things in life, is that things will change.
Yes.
And that's the gift, isn't it? Because, if you, hold on to water too long when you're swimming, you're going to drown, You got to let that slip through your fingers and open your hands and let the change occur.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing, change.
Yeah, it's definitely, I'm not the little Māori girl that came in the 1980s. There's been so many changes, right? And then, embracing those changes. So it's a massive journey, but also, it's a good thing. I think we're all different. I met you when, teenager.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And now to be sitting, a table apart, 30 odd years later, it's incredible.
It is.
So these days in Australia, you run your own company with a couple of girlfriends.
I don't know if I call it a company. I like to call it a fashion collective, because I like to see we're all on the same playing field, and the business was actually set up to empower everyone that became a part of it. It's a fashion collective because we came together. We wanted to focus on people and the community, and part of that is celebrating culture. And also,
what kind of nationality background are the girls? What do we got in the mix? Who's in the team?
So we got in the mix we have Italian from Sardinia. She's our passionate guardian of the ocean. She moved over here to Bondi, and then we have, she's actually the co-founder. She grew up on the Northern Beaches, but she spent a lot of time in Mudgee, and she's based in the Blue Mountains where the studio is. She works and designs from the studio.
Aussie girl?
Yes, Aussie. And we have Siobhan, who's over in Parramatta, so we've got a real diverse. And then we have someone from Taranaki in New Zealand. there's me, and we have Diri, who's our youngest member. We bring her in to the projects because she was one of the first people that we met. When she is like comfortable with it, there's this understanding between all of us. So we commit to 3 projects a year because it needs to run alongside practically with our jobs and our various studies. It actually took us into a space that we weren't entirely comfortable with because we didn't know much about it, and that was the Australian Indigenous fashion. And the reason why is because we understood that we had to spend a lot of time with these people and make and develop relationships. And I think more and more brands have become sensitive to this, and they're doing that. And there's a designer called Lisa Gorman. She actually went out to Fitzroy Crossing and spent a lot of time with the people out there before she decided to do a collection with them, because they you have to allow for whether they want to do a collection. They don't necessarily see their artwork as if they're
as good as quality, something that people want to buy, or
it's very sacred. It's really, really sacred. And if you're going to take their designs and put them onto clothing, for us, fashion
that makes a lot of sense. I mean, obviously, people just don't. You don't get it if you're not a part of it.
That's right. We grew up in a community that didn't have it didn't have interaction with Indigenous Australians.
There's still no Indigenous Australians that I know of. I'm sure there is residing on the northern beaches of Sydney, but it astounds me that Manly's called Manly, and I can't see one Indigenous bloke that essentially would have harnessed an A Manly back in the day when Cook pulled up there. You know?
Well, do you know what with Manly? So Manly has thousands of Aboriginal sites, whether people know that or not.
Thousands?
Yes, thousands. From West Head, across Ku-ring-gai and back down towards North Head to assess heritage, what they regard as heritage sites, and then offer them to the Environment Minister to be considered to be on heritage list.
Is he Indigenous, the Environment Minister? Because Australia should have an Indigenous Environment Minister in many ways, because they'd know more about the land than the white guys, I think.
You know what? They do have an Aboriginal within the team. But unfortunately, these things can be connected to business. The Aboriginal sites on the northern beaches, a lot of them are exposed. They're not even protected from vandalism. So you have that. And also, I know that people may have heard about Rio Tinto with the rock shelter platforms in Western Australia, but those rock shelter platforms weren't on the heritage list either. And it's astounding because all these things are like 40,000 years plus heritage. What other list should there be for them? Sometimes they don't even make it past council assessment because the councils just don't regard it as a valuable investment. We do have an Aboriginal Heritage Office here in Freshwater. Not many people know about that. That's Karen Smith.
That's news to me.
Oh,
That's
right.
total news to me.
Okay.
You wouldn't hear about it.
Yes.
Well, there's no local newspaper anymore either to tell you about it.
Yeah, that is a shame. And also, so Karen runs the Heritage Office there. We did have last year as a part of the syndicate's projects. We worked alongside Goodwill Hunting and the Sisterhood, who are 2 phenomenal community groups, and we had an Indigenous, introducing Indigenous women who live on the northern beaches to the community. And so we had this little event for them, which involved a fashion show also. Fashion connects people. Everyone wears clothes, so it's a very good social point to start from. And Wtih Witters Hunt, who lives here at Queenscliff, she was the main speaker. I was so happy for that because I felt when I was watching her and when people left, and the feedback from it was that there was a little shift in the mindset because they had heard Wtih speak. And Wtih was very much about, yes, we have a deficit history, but we're going to celebrate and uplift our culture. This will be our language. This is how we will frame things. And I think she's done that beautifully. She's doing a campaign for the moment for Country Road, and just highlighting all the Indigenous designers that a lot of people don't know about. And it's done in such a beautiful narrative. And, it's kind, it's gentle, and it's warm and inclusive.
Good stories, right? Because, obviously the Indigenous artwork tells a story. A lot of it does. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Well, fashion actually should be the stories of your past and legacy. Somehow
It
that got
shouldn't be
upturned.
fast fashion. It shouldn't be like we've sold out, that went well, we should just do a derivative of it and sell it again, or...
Yeah. Well, fast fashion, so Zara had its first shop in New York in 1990, and they had boasted that took 15 days to come off the production floor into the store. Now, if you're making things in 15 days at high volume, there has to be some impact. And the environment was definitely taking that impact of everyone was trying to respond to this fast fashion model. And then
all demand.
It might fall apart next week, but it still looks like it came straight off the runway. I'll just
buy
buy another
one.
I'll buy 10 in different colours.
Why not, right?
Yeah.
But what was it doing to the environment?
The earth is, I want to establish this point because there might be people listening going, the world and earth has always evolved and changed. Yes, it has. Up until the 19th century, it was evolving and changing. But it wasn't until in the last 20 years a human activity started to make an impact on the environment. And this was because of the fashion industry is the second biggest polluting industry behind the oil industry.
Wow.
And that's because of production, the dyeing, there's a number of reasons, but most of all it was generating waste because of the overproduction, and every environmental problem can be traced back to waste.
100%.
Yes.
100%. There isn't anything on the planet that we can't reuse right now or recycle, and we can go forward without actually making any new anything.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's right. I think like all these new innovative companies are talking about, this new thing called circular economy. Our parents and grandparents' era and Indigenous people, they were probably more or less like connected with nature. They wore clothes, they made clothes so that would last longer, and they circulated within families. They weren't making clothes to waste them and dispose of them. So it's not a new concept.
It doesn't make a lot of sense, does it, to actually make something that won't last?
Yeah, and that's from the design process. That's right from the start. Like, okay, we need to make volumes and we need to make profit. So they're already in that mindset of it doesn't matter how wasteful it is. And
is there any responsibility that they have? Is there a duty of care, or is there a note that they have to come back and pay to, is there a land tax for something like that? Because obviously they've damaged the planet. There should be some recall on it.
Oh, there should be. No, there's no legislation around damage to the environment. No, not at all. China would have to pay a lot of money. They had the factories that were polluting their rivers, the denim factories, like the rivers were turning blue from the toxic chemicals that they were using.
And what about slavery? Isn't there an era of and a whole movement behind there about slavery is human trafficking? Correct? Is that right? Or?
Yeah. Well, so if you say, for example, if you are paying a supplier in China for production, unless you're hands-on and you can trace or there's some transparency around the supplier chain, all they've got is the money that they're given, the budget, and then they can outsource to other whether people working from home or to other places where there's not health and safety regulations in a warehouse. You can't be on top of that if you're not regularly visiting your production lines, right? So effectively, people were finding that even children were making clothes. Or people were working in long hours and cramped conditions.
Well, outsourcing makes a lot of sense when you need to run a company, but at the end of the day, if you're outsourcing to people of zero human ethics, essentially you're not going to get a result that humans should wear, correct? Yeah, that humans should wear. But you know what? Even it being outsourced, we lost, I would love to see the fashion industry localise again. What's it like here? Is there much in Australia at all?
So we had a lot of mills closed down, wool mills closed down. You can count them on one hand, I think. And there were little things that used to be held in quite high regard, but used to be more tailors, button shops, trimmings. All those little things were lost because they were competing against fast fashion production. And then people started to lose the regard for anything.
Did
like
social
that.
media ramp up fast fashion as well? Would have accelerated it.
So influencers were being used a lot, and all to the influencers. I'm happy for you all, but there were investigative journalism was losing out to people's opinions, right? It's like
because magazines are dead, right?
Yeah, and it's only happened in the last 6 months. Yeah, we've lost some publications, some big publications off the Australian industry, and I find that quite sad for journalists. It's been happening over a number of years, but a lot of the people that are coming onto these digital platforms aren't qualified journalists. They're people with opinions that cause, or they provoke or incite controversy.
Okay.
To get engagement. Right,
trendsetters.
Well, you're not just reading a paper anymore. It was you're enjoying the paper, the source, and everything. Now, because of social media, these people are engaging with the people that are providing the media, and that's one thing I can say about the recent protests and riots. The media has a big role to play. Huge role. And we're definitely being conditioned by the perception that we see. I thought the other week I was watching some looting going on in Michigan. There was no black person in this particular loot. There was probably Hispanics, white people, and Asians. But because it's connected with the Black Lives Matter movement, it's connected with that culture. And the media, if they don't have division, right, they don't have a good story. So I think they have a massive role to play, and I guess it's what you choose to take in.
I'm shocked how a story will go out, like what's has happened, with George Floyd, which has been horrendously, heinous.
Yeah.
And then, the Australian media, when the riots have kicked off here, they haven't really gone back to the source of why. They keep talking about, well, George Floyd, he's rested in peace, but what about David Dungay and all these other Indigenous people in Australia that haven't even had a voice? Whoever's running the side of the political agenda isn't picking up and closing the loop. They just haven't had a voice. I mean, the protests that have been, told they can't protest, and the amount of police on New South Wales streets, I found quite... it was overpowering. It shouldn't have happened. They should let people have their voice, because Australia has got to. I think it's going to come a time where Australia has to own up to the situation that's happened with the Indigenous people here.
Okay. So with the protests here, I would like to see a little bit of wisdom used. We are still in the middle of a pandemic. We have to be careful for our health and other people's health. I did go onto a live last night, and they were at Hyde Park, and I'm really surprised that they were reading the chat, because I was thinking you're in the middle of the protest. But it was like, are you guys safe? Just are you safe? Because it's cold and wet and.
That's true, 100%.
Yeah, and they responded. They're like, yeah, we're about to shut it down. We're going to go home. I was like, oh wow, got a response from that. So I think a little bit of wisdom with the protests would be good, because under the current conditions, if you go out to protest in masses, there should be a quarantine. Your self-quarantine for your families and the people around you.
Yeah.
And and I understand the frustration and the passion around it as well.
I guess they don't feel like they're getting heard. Social media won't do it.
No, social media won't do it. So, gosh, where to start? So I and all love to the Dungay family, which he passed away in 2015. Watching that case, and then it comes to last year, and there's just no convictions. And
so none of those 6 correctional facility officers that were a part of David Dungay's death even got a single charge put on them?
Not to my knowledge, unless something has changed.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, there's also there's all like the Namahita family in the 1950s. They had Albert, who, all love to the family, and I just called him Albert, but Mr. Namahita, he was a famous artist. He didn't do the traditional Aboriginal paintings, but he became so popular, he was making so much money. But because Aboriginals weren't considered citizens until 1967, they decided to make him a citizen so they could tax him to get a bit of money. This is the little things.
Fair. That's fair.
Oh, yeah.
Because he can make money.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the only reason.
Yeah. Well, they wanted it. They wanted some buy-in, if that makes sense, because he was quite famous.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah. So they set a government rule for him, and then they end up incarcerating him by that same rule because someone had left alcohol in the area or the community that they lived, and they couldn't charge anyone, so they charged him.
Because he's the guy with money.
He was the Aboriginal with citizenship. So they decided to charge him. He was incarcerated for 3 months, and it was found to be unfair. And after that, he was despondent, and he died. Like, he did get sick, but he died. He didn't want to come back out there because he had done so much for Australia. He like for the art world.
The will of people that gets taken away by legislation, it happens.
Yes.
I swear it happens.
Yeah.
Like right now, there's so many companies out there that, people say you fell through the cracks. You were a director of your company, you weren't an employee, you weren't on PAYG. So
that's right. Yeah,
therefore you're not getting paid. Like there's thousands.
Yeah.
And then there's thousands of companies out there that are probably ripping off the system. And these people who got nothing are going to end up despondent.
Yeah.
And they won't want to work ever again.
Yeah.
They'll say, I'll put my hand up for the dole. I can take a payout forever because you took my will away. I guess that's what happened to him.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think the government's going to just have a very different social problem.
It's a bit of a meltdown at the moment, really, I think.
Yeah.
Because Scott Morrison, he made a mistake, I think.
Yes, he did on Thursday morning.
Yeah.
He's apologised, but how could you not know that history?
That's fully, stupid what he did.
Well, I was just astounded by when he said there was no slavery in Australia. And in fact, this is quite personal to me. So my husband's maternal side of the family, including my husband, speak Bishlama and a pidgin language that was created on the cane fields when they enslaved Pacific Islanders.
In Australia?
In Australia. And that was the 1950s. And also there were chain gangs of Aboriginals being used as house servants and really hard labour-intensive jobs on cattle stations that was on their land.
On Indigenous land?
On their Indigenous. So the farms had been put onto their land. And they were employed. They weren't even employed by wages. They came to meet the farmers.
They weren't killed. That's how they were
employed.
They
had their lives.
Yeah, God.
They had their lives because the farmers didn't know how to work the arid land with their fancy husbandry techniques, so they needed the Aboriginals.
But there was no slavery, so our Prime Minister said.
I think he apologised. I haven't seen that apology, but you know what? If you want to talk about heritage, and he was talking about it on the back of, I think he was trying to talk against the protests. And there are actually things that are happening in Burrell and New South Wales under the Labor program scheme where Pacific Islanders have been brought from Samoa and Vanuatu. They've got them living in cramped conditions and charging them for it. It was your program, you pay for it, and you get them there on your own money. Like what are the KPIs or results for that program? I don't understand.
COVID hit me that hard initially that I said to my wife, I'm like, I don't care if I'm going to be put in some communist sort of way of living, but if I'm put in prison, you feed me and you house me. That's it. That's kind of basic because my company got destroyed. Like I literally got flogged overnight. I've never seen as much money disappear and possibilities disappear instantly. But I said, if you're going to do that, just pay me, just house me. It's okay.
Yeah.
and I'll start again. But I didn't ask for it, and I swear, and I'm white, I'm Australian. I'm actually an Aryan. I got blue eyes as well, so I'm privileged.
Yeah.
But it's crazy, like what the poor Indigenous people are facing, and the people of color still today in Australia.
Yeah. So for me, racism is a condition of the heart, right? That guy, the man that was videoed on top of George Floyd's neck, I'm pretty sure he didn't leave his house that day and go, I'm going to kill someone today. He was in a moment of like he was in dominating a physically stronger man than him, and there were new policemen surrounding him. And then his internal heart condition just took over. It was like, it was hardened, but I find now that having the experiences and watching these protests roll out, that it is a condition of heart. You can still be racist and not do a violent act. You can still be racist and just live your life happily and not have a word to say, right? You are conditioned by the environment that you grew up in. You can't help. I mean, I went to school with boys who I'm very close to, and I can hear them repeating things that I heard when I was young. And they say to me, "Yeah, but you're different." I'm not any different. It's definitely a.
I hate the cop out. We've come a long way though. We've come a long way from just being white bigotry fools. The amount of nicknames for people of color and different color. Whether it be Oriental, Hispanic. Obviously, people of darker skin. It just blew me away when I was a kid growing up. It was a really stupid mindset a lot of Australians had.
Yeah.
But we haven't come a long way.
Well, I think it's implicit bias. Like that comes from the schoolyard. I had heaps of schoolyard banter in Harbord. Like as I was sharing with you, we used to laugh about Samoans having big cars because you need it for your families. Maoris need big backyards for their hangies. Yet we don't cook hangies in our backyards. It was
no
what your
parties?
perception. Yeah, no toga parties or leaf or coconut bikini things. Yeah, but if I look at the influences around that time, like there were popular movies like Coming to America that used to make light of and tease the culture. There's all the influences you have at that time, and it accumulates over time, right? If you're getting negative perceptions of a particular culture, it builds on top of that. I was really lucky with things that were said to me because I quite like banter. I've got very quick-witted friends, so I was able to sharpen my iron. And I'm not patting myself on the back, but I would sass back out of. It was out of protection of myself
and your culture, right?
Yeah, and my culture. So if I heard something that was meant to be derogatory, I'm older now, so I can discern when something's coming from meanness or bad intention.
I'd say it's evil in a way.
Yeah, you can tell the spirit it's coming from or the heart that it's coming from. So usually if someone's going to take a swipe, I think take it good because I've had years of training with all my friends. And I'm saying that with much affection because, my friends are quick-witted. We had banter. It was like surfy culture. Have you ever heard mates? Yeah, of course you have. Banter around each other. It's quite funny. 1 or 2 words. Yeah, and
you've got to have thick skin to survive it.
That's right. You can't take it much to heart, right?
And so, what you've mentioned earlier, you spent some time in the States.
Yeah.
What was it like in the States? And you're around, from what I understand, at a pretty tough time as well there in America.
Yeah, so I was there in 91. I lived with an African-American family. So my host sister, Monique, she used to work in the police department and she used to come home and tell me of all these things that were said, like racially, about her, and
At work?
Yes, at work. But
by other officers probably?
Yes. But she was, she took that on as a daily, like just a part of her life to deal with. And they were treated very differently. And I can remember moving to their house and thinking, because I had the option to be with a white family, the Berkemeiers, and then the Hawkins, but I really wanted to find out more about their culture. And coming from Manly at the time, like breakdance groups were big, the hip hop culture was coming in, the music was big, even all the different,
Rocksteady crew were doing their thing.
Yeah, the Reflex team. All honour
Durwood
to
and the
Durwood. That was something that I wanted to, discover more. And then
you like to dance, obviously. You're into the feel of movement.
I love to dance. I must say I had implicit bias about. We had a time period where a lot of the northern beaches were going to DCMs, and I had my own perceptions of what dancing was, right? So my girlfriends would get up in their beautiful little outfits, and I'd just like go, oh, please don't dance. That's my bias on what white people can, and actually they were really good. And I was like, I better just sit back here in this corner because they're actually quite good dancers, right? That get my bum off the podium and just sit down and appreciate them. So I went over to the States, and I became, as part of the exchange program, I had to play some kind of sport. They tried to put me as a cheerleader. Laid back Northern Beaches girls don't do cheerleading really well, right? It's for
one rehearsal.
Yeah, it's just very, very like so extrovert and out there, and it was great. But then basketball was my thing, and I became really good friends with, she was probably the top point guard on the Eastern Coast at that time, Stephanie Childs. We played Foothill High together, and then we went to Orange County to play.
California.
Region. Yeah. So I might have to get that newspaper article out of her when the year we were travelling, and her brother used to come and speak to us sometimes, and that was Chris Childs. He was drafted to the New York Knicks, and he's actually infamous for fronting up Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant when there were unfair penalties. And you can Google that.
Was he?
Yeah, he was the justice for the rookies. Even though it's a non-contact sport, so when you're defending each other, it is quite like the refs let the flow of the game. That's the importance of it. So when he'd get unfair penalties as a rookie, he would like front up to all the big players. Like it was kind of a thing like, you need to concede because these guys are bigger players, but he didn't care. And I love that about him. And that was what Steph was like. So I had a really great basketball experience with them. It was hard. My dad was the rep Manly basketball coach for me. Our warm-ups were just like running around the court a few times. Their warm-ups were like 10K runs. And I was going, what is, like, they did everything on a much bigger scale and all means.
I guess they knew there was like a professional side to where they could end up as well.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, it was definitely that. So that's from a young age. Like I think I was playing sports for fun, and I didn't see myself taking it as a career path. So the training was really, really hardcore.
Hellish, rain, hail or shine, I bet.
Yes, and they're very competitive, right? The population, you need to have an edge over the others. So everyone's training that hard.
Is it 200 million in the States?
Oh, gosh,
that's
I
big
can't,
numbers,
I
isn't
can't
it?
say it. Yeah, I would.
And how was at the time? Did you feel, because you know what blows me away? You go to these amazing sportsmen, especially in basketball, and a lot of them are African American, and they're legends. They're, they are the probably the greatest legends in America. Probably more so than American football. I mean, I'm not American, obviously. Slater's a freak, 11 times world surfing champion. But, when you look at sort of the basketball game, those guys are heroes. Was there racism towards them as well? Or is there racism towards them? Or they're just, again, people look at them, they're different?
There will always be, I feel, implicit bias. They're like, all black men can play basketball, all black men can jump. There are some that can't. There are some black men that are Republicans, believe it or not. There are some black people have their own reservations and prejudices against white people.
It's trust, though. They've probably lost that trust, as we talked about, the templates, and the foundational respect. I guess they probably have lost that whole trust level.
Yeah, that's a systemic issue from a range of things. I shared with you, I learnt while I was in the States that in the 1930s it was a system called redlining, where the banks would select who they would invest, and most black communities would sit outside those redlined zones. They did make it illegal. It's still carried out, and those 235 cities in the US are feeling the consequences or the impact. So they have that on top of, they had to fight for their civil rights, and then they come in segregation. It's a whole accumulation of things. But before the George Floyd case, I was sent something from my friends in America. It was a live that was done by Sean Reid. He died on May 7th. And the live was a 21-year-old who was being quite naughty. The police chased him in a car. They tasered him. This was all because Sean had his phone in his hand. And then they shot him in broad daylight. Not only was it disturbing. Yeah.
And they thought it was a gun. That's their excuse.
Oh, well, they're trying to argue that he was armed, but there were too many witnesses. It wasn't only the death that affected me, it was the language of the policemen when they were around his body. So you can hear a policeman saying, "Oh, well, homie, guess you're going to have a closed casket." And then the other one follows with, "We tasered you real bad." Now, I have heard that language before. When Rodney King was beaten up, the man that was videoing caught the language of those policemen, and they were like, "Oh, you monkey," and calling him all similar things to what Adam Goods was hearing. So it's not only the brutality or the violence, it's they're actually expressing, again, their heart condition.
I'm literally blown away, and I, as I said, you and I haven't spent a lot of time together in 30 years, but I know the caliber of woman that you were, and I know the caliber of woman that you are now, and it seems that to me, this sort of situation you're explaining to me it's systemic, as you said. It's disgusting. It's got to stop. Like I see some people's mindset around it, and they're going, "Oh, should they be going on with riots and this?" Well, you don't want to go into violence, but
No.
you do need to make a stand, and I think Australia needs to stand on the treatment of people of colour and Indigenous people. Seems like the situations that are going on in America may inflame yet again.
We need to stand together to drive any positive change.
All people.
Yeah, all nationalities. Australia's a multicultural country. We just need to stand together, and not be like there's distractions. The media can cause distractions. It's taking your mind off what should be the focus, as you were saying. They're not looking for the source of the problem. It's because they've been provided with all these distractions.
These great images, and they just pivot onto it.
Prue McSween and Samantha Armitage are being sued over their comments about the stolen generation that they made back in 2018. So they're being sued.
So what did she say?
She was talking about the stolen generation, and that maybe it needed to happen again.
That stolen generation, it's like they're still fighting to be recognised. They haven't even had a chance in Australia.
It is intergenerational trauma. It's much like what I experienced in London. It cycles. You can't break those generational cycles unless something absolutely radical happens. And what's happening across the world is quite radical. I wish the catalysts weren't the deaths of especially the trigger was George Floyd's death, but something radical needs to be done to bring it from underneath the surface, to bring it to the surface.
Well, Tez, this is one of the times of the show that I like to, do a shout out, and I'm going to look straight down this camera here and say my shout out to anyone who's, been a part of the stolen generation, or your families, or your forebearers, all the people that you never got to meet as who they were and who they are and who your family are really connected to. I'm sorry that it's happened to you, and I shout out for you to all to find peace. And a calm shout out with a lot of love, because essentially you've been wronged. I feel you've been totally wronged, and there's no righting a wrong, but there's the ability to make peace with it. And I hope that you and your families and your tribes find inner peace with what's ahead of you, because it's a beautiful journey ahead.
Actually, I want to thank the Indigenous people and my life for letting me come this close to you. I value it so much. I don't take it for granted. It's our privilege to be alongside you on your journeys, and also to the Knox family, Jenny, Vanessa, Nathan and Simone, all my love over the last couple of weeks and for the weeks and months to follow. Lots of love, and yeah, to everyone that I grew up with. Love you. Love you all. And
Mate,
thank you.
There is nothing better than love, Tereza. Thank you. Obviously, you're now pushing forward with your company, what the girls are doing, you and the four others. What issues are you facing there in New South Wales that I suppose other states aren't facing with some of the artists?
Yeah. Well, in terms of the artists that are out on communities,
because you're a part of the Australian Fashion Council, aren't you?
Yes, that's right. So they have been able to give us the ability to come along, actually bring to our awareness some of the Indigenous brands and designers and emerging designers that we could help. I'm actually wearing Nagali Australia. Denny is the designer. She works with an art centre, which is actually in Victoria, and Lindsay Miller is the artist. So she takes his art and puts it on to
Aboriginal Indigenous art?
Yes.
Looks really groovy.
Yeah, we love her stuff. She is part of the Australian Fashion Council. I must give them credit because they have given us opportunities to be part of projects.
Which gives the artists opportunities, your artists that you work with?
Yeah, it gives them another option, like income. Nagali also supports like children in rural communities and to buy Australian local. To the art centres, not just art centres, they're massive. They're the core of the community. They often have health services there. It's a little bit like
a big community centre, is it?
Yeah, like a big community centre. Like we have Madais in New Zealand. So we have big meeting houses.
And they're called Meadows?
Madais.
Okay.
Yeah. So actually I'm very lucky that I have like 2 Madais back in my very small community and plus my mother's side. So these art centres are very much like that. They're essential to the community. I'm not sure.
Health and wellbeing.
Health and wellbeing. I'm not sure if people knew about the government system where they took them out into these towns, created these little towns where they were not very accessible, and gave them services and food that aren't not contrary to what their bodies know. Like it went from bush food to like junk food. Like they put Coke and things like white bread and Coke into these shops. That's all they had access to.
No nutritional food
and it's
at
true,
all.
yeah. And people like for the Aboriginal community, they were mixing people across country. There's, you go into each other's country and there's a protocol behind it.
The Indigenous language per se, it's huge from what I understand in Australia.
They used to call Aboriginals Aborigines, like a plural, as if they were just like one race, but there's actually different nations within one race. I mean, for the Māori, we just have one language, and I can't remember how many tribes. But
do you speak the language?
No, I only know the swear words. No, I can. No, I know basic greetings. I was part of a group called Ngāti Ranana in London. They were the Māori group there while I was living there, and they taught me a lot, especially. So when Maoris introduce themselves, we have a thing called whakapapa, and it describes our line of descent. So we can describe right from the canoe to the mountain to the river and the meeting house and our ancestors. I learnt that back in New Zealand, but I refined it even more in London.
That's some powerful storytelling there, isn't it? And telling of your origin.
I think you asked me, like, how did the Irish come into it? So in 1918 on St. Anne's, the Irish and Irish and Scottish came down to New Zealand. The Irish came down after the potato famine. They had a potato famine, so there was work opportunities in New Zealand. So you will find a lot of New Zealanders will have European surnames. So my best friend's name is Wtih. Yeah, I think
I know
Donna.
Yeah, definitely. So that must have been because they ran out of I guess they ran out of their vodka because if they had a potato.
That's right. No.
No, I'm joking.
Well, the whaling industry was massive then. So they came, a lot of them worked in the whaling industries along the coast. And, they fell in love with Maori women or Maori men. It was mainly men that came down. But, and a lot of them were able to inherit Māori land because of their marriages, including my great-great-grandfather, because he married a Maori woman who had a lot of Maori land on the Eastern Cape. Well, our family have benefited from that. But
fantastic.
Our uncles and aunts never let us. There was never a gap in our education about our family. And like we come from a strong kinship community, and I feel very lucky to.
It's a big belonging, isn't it? Because a lot of people they search forever for who they are, especially if they have trauma, a childhood trauma where their parents are separated and their dad runs off, and they're always thinking, who am I? Whereas what you have there, is remarkable understanding of your heritage, your lineage, and your family. It's a beautiful thing to know.
Yeah, I appreciate it very much, and also I appreciate the relationship that we have with the environment. Like with Mother Earth, it's integral to survival and living. So I have to be kind with knowing that that all people don't appreciate that. It's not if you don't have that sense of where you belong in the world with Mother Nature, then it's not by any fault of your own. That will come eventually.
Well, you were saying earlier that fast fashion's polluted Mother Earth. And obviously we're in a bit of a fashion recession at the moment, just due to COVID. Like people are freaked out. There's job keepers. People are literally concerned about their spending habits. Where do you see it going in the next 6 months, 12 months? Where do you see the fashion industry bouncing back? I mean, there's a lot of designs out there, and a lot of collections that are shelved now, and they're now got to design a season ahead, but they didn't make money for 2 seasons before. Or how does it work in your game?
Yeah, so I believe the ones that were essentially strong, with strong capital foundation bases, financial bases, will survive through the pandemic, but it's already causing some impact. So obviously consumers aren't spending more, and over the next few months to a year, they're going to contract. They're not going to spend much at all. So that's going to affect our retail. Our retail have a lot of stock that they need to convert to cash quickly. So there's going to be huge discounted marks on a lot of brands, which will effectively dilute the brand if you put your brand in a positioning of premium. It will be very sad, but I think Myer and David Jones are going to be impacted by it. Actually, I went into Myer yesterday and there wasn't actually much stock on the floor. I think there might have been there might be some distribution thing happening there, but there wasn't. I went to sleep and said, what happened to the rest of it? And they said, we're just not bringing anything into the floor.
Total fear.
That might change the model. Could you possibly buy straight from, because I used to work in wholesale at Luxottica, which is a luxury eyewear brand. They do Ray-Bans. And could you possibly buy straight from wholesale instead of having the retailer? But you don't want that to happen, do you? Because you want everyone to have jobs. But they're going to have to look at all the different business models to make it for survival. And also, if you don't have a combined strategy, it's called omni strategy of e-commerce and retail. If you've just focused on retail as a brand, then you're going to have to bring yourself up to date pretty quickly with like digital options and channels.
Big time. And also too, you might have to downscale your shop size, because I guess some of those rents must be outrageous. They must be, multi-tiered, multiple year investments in rental.
Yeah.
contracts and commercial arrangements must just be petrifying for these companies.
Well, I saw in the US and Italy, like some of their leases are 25-year leases for some of these heritage buildings.
That's some deep engagement, isn't it?
That's a big commitment that they're going to have to try and navigate in this COVID period and post-COVID period.
How do you feel when they say, the world debt and there's a global debt? What do you think about that? I always think, if there's a global debt, who do we owe the money to? Do we owe it to Jupiter or Mars? Or, Australia might have a debt, but the world, we're in debt globally. It's like, I guess we've all made mistakes and we've all learned. And, Greece is crippled, Italy's crippled, they'll never come back. There's humans there.
Yeah.
Why can't it come back?
That's right.
Why can't we forgive and forget and move forward? Is it China that's too powerful and, they're freaked out and Russia wants to take control, or, North Korea, who even knows, anything about North Korea? How's their fashion world,
Yeah, so they actually have a very massive, besides China, a real big luxury base. And I've been trying to watch it over the last month or so as they're all coming out of a pandemic or whatever various stages they're in, like how they're going to respond.
Is that North Korea?
Yeah, no, actually I can't even comment on North Korea. It was more China, and
they love the luxury products.
They're probably the biggest consumer market for luxury goods.
You see them in outside all the big stores in town. If you're on George Street or Pitt Street, they're just hanging by them, they line up.
Yeah, and also, because their millennial generation also had the biggest consumer income base.
Daddy's money.
I don't know. There's probably another thing that I watch, like a movie. What is it? Crazy Rich Asians. Seeing that for the first time. A lot of them are part of my world. They do wear some of the luxury brands to school pickup.
The latest and greatest, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm not a massive fan. I don't mind wearing luxury clothes, but I don't like big and blazing logos over anything. I just feel like you can be
that looks
understated.
Luxury, though, what you're wearing. To me, that looks great. It's super fancy.
Oh, do you think? Yeah.
Well, it's not.
Did you hear that, Denny? He thinks it's
it is nice.
Fancy.
It is. It's nice. There's nothing. I can't see anything different in that than what you're probably going to buy from a big name brand.
Yeah, and and that's probably with my the normal day-to-day person wouldn't know the expense of some of these brands that they're wearing. That's just because that's a part of my world. It might actually look. So I have one jumper that has a tiger on it, and people think it's because of Joe Exotic and Tiger King. I was actually given that, and it's actually by a French brand called Kenzo. Unless you kind of have that knowledge of what those brands are. For the normal day-to-day mum, they probably wouldn't know what they're wearing. I'm a big fan of thrift and thrift stores. So
Salvos?
Yeah, Salvos is across the road from me actually, but it's been closed because of all the... You can't give second-hand clothes during a pandemic. There's a whole different hygiene system there involved. But I will go into thrift stores and just run my hands along the clothes because you can feel what is quality.
In the actual
and the
weave
actual
of the fabric.
Yeah, in the fabric. And that's why I think retail's really important. People don't let retail fail. You need that tactile face-to-face engagement in an in-store experience. And you don't get that when you buy online.
Well, I'd never buy I don't really go into DJs or anything like that, to be honest. I think my wife would occasionally, but, you'd hate to think you'd go, oh, David Jones is online now. Can't wait, davidjones.com.au. I just couldn't see it taking off, It's not, the surf industry did it through Surf Stitch and it sort of survived, but it failed. Surf industry is in tatters.
Yeah.
The fashion industry, it's going to have to climb a new mountain, isn't it,
It actually, COVID was the dramatic, radical change that made us look at the systems. And for me, I want a bit like the hope for a better industry, reimagining an industry and a different landscape. It's really great. We've been doing the old systems for so long now. And there's even the way that we're presenting collections. There used to be 4 seasons, and now they were like 6 seasons and a drop every 2 weeks. Like we were just in flux with so many clothes. There's too many clothes on the planet. Like even now with moving stock and everything, even if everyone buys anything, there's still there's so much overproduction of clothes.
Saturation.
Yeah,
right?
we don't need more. We definitely don't need more. So.
And what about what brands have you seen blow you away that they've come and gone, or they've lost their brand? A brand that came out and just sort of like shocked the world with the way they sort of came to market and fell over, virtually in the same hand.
Yeah, so a lot of Australian brands actually have fallen too. There's a real disparity between business and creativity, and the poor designers need to keep up with what the accountants think.
It's called business, right?
Yeah,
not
business.
Not just having fun with clothes.
That's right. They say get down to business now. We're going to help drive you commercially positively. But
is that what you guys do? Is that what your company does?
My business partner, she's the co-founder. She has a label called Algorithm Designed, and she chooses all her fabrics by they're sustainable fabrics like satin tencel. She also likes to use rescued resources, and she created. Well, actually, I went to her and said, I have this vision for a dress. Because I'm not an illustrator, and yes, I do sew. But
so you have a vision, you come up with a vision.
Yeah.
And
Usually,
you go to her? Or?
And I went to her, and I had dead stock left over from a roll that I bought at Reverse Garbage. Reverse Garbage is a resource centre in Marrickville. We actually partner with them for various things. And I said, do you think we can make this dress out of this dead stock material?
What's dead stock material?
So dead stock would be the end of the roll for usually luxury brands. Like they've bought the material and there's not enough in the end of the roll for them to use for anything else. So they just throw them.
And you can buy it.
Well, if they're being sold, we're actually looking at approaching all the designers so they don't have to discard them. We can be one of the first options. Well, I think there's a lot of businesses hopefully doing that, but we'd like to be one of the businesses to be considered as top of mind to have their end of roll, because they can't really sell the material, or they can make accessories, I guess, but that might not be in their production timelines.
And then your team will turn it into a collection?
Yeah, so she was very clever and turned resource collections and the fabrics combined into all these a collection called Reimagine. And she has just got this incredible talent for making these gorgeous pieces out of wasted fabric or textile. And actually that's all the girls in our team. They've got that incredible talent. One of them integrates fabrics into her artwork because she's an artist.
Okay.
Yeah, and
repurpose.
Yeah, you repurpose. Give a new life to these clothes and everything. Don't just throw them away.
Maybe remember those jeans bags? Maybe they'll come back in fashion.
Yeah, there are actually some around.
They make a lot of sense, don't they?
Well, yeah, actually there's a retail store called I think it's Black and Manly that's near Ruby Lane. They have a brand in there called Nudie Jeans where you actually go into the retail stores and you can get your jeans repaired. It doesn't matter what brand it is. This has given a new opportunity for retail assistants not to just be idle on the floor, like they're sewing well, and that's giving an in-store experience. So that has been a reimagined concept. I think there's so much innovation, there's so much opportunity, and like what would be the COVID pandemic, like we're seeing everything as an opportunity rather than we're losing retail. And we all met backstage on runway shows, and they're talking about not having these runway shows anymore because they are expensive and they do generate a lot of waste. There's other ways to present before and after the runway, extend the brand story longer. And also it's provided digital acceleration in the industry.
Well,
And
the UI is everything, right? The user interface and the user experience, the UX, how people actually feel, they're communicated to. And, when they get their product, how good it feels in the hand. As you said, you won't get that online.
yeah,
You'll only get that through that tactile, sort of, feel of a garment, right?
yeah, that's right. I mean, we've yet to see how this all pans out. London Fashion Week just went well, they launched this week and it's their first digital London Fashion Week. And usually you have fashion weeks in September, but I think they're going to watch carefully what happens with this and then how they will conduct. I had the privilege of going over to New York for New York Fashion Week to work with some designers there, and it used to be it was a centralised system in Bryant Park, and then because of the attendance and the different designers and what they stood for, it's spread out over the city, and they started to do them in the street. So I did Rebecca Minkoff show, which she decided to have in the street. It has to be reviewed for buyers and the network to come down to Australia. It's very expensive.
Oh, without a doubt. And you got to be able to get in here to start with. I mean,
yeah,
they're only just going to start letting, students back in. So, to have the ability, to get into Australia, that's how people need to even think about pondering to come here.
Yeah, that's right.
I was speaking to a mate of mine, he's in music, and he said they're he's a big name band, Australian band, and he said that they're looking at now being booked for headlining lots of shows, whether it be previously international acts headlining.
Right.
Because we may not get the international acts in Australia. Hence, in fashion, that might be the same game with the fashion zone, that you just won't get the buyers here. So you got to do something different, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think it's too hard for the entertainment industry, because even when they came in, when there was no COVID, there was like all these insurances that they had to have. It was like, they were on the back foot before they even get here. So, we were really lucky to get all the musicians that we do have, because I know I hear a lot of the common complaining, we don't have the same music industry. We've got a good music industry here.
We've just got to find some appreciation in what we have locally, right? Is that?
Yeah.
So for your business, you and the girls, are you after the next big thing, or where do you find what's the new direction of the company?
Yeah, right. So we're never after the next big thing. We're actually a bit countercultural.
Great.
We don't set out, we're going to do opposite to what everyone's doing. But we always seem to find ourselves in the space where people want to do innovative and new things. So this year is the first National Indigenous Fashion Awards, which is held up at Darwin. That's in August. And
are you girls part of that initiative?
Well, yeah, we're part of it where we're advocating. We had to advocating for all the brands that we support here, because you need to nominate them, and it's a bit of a process. And we really want New South Wales designers to be, accounted. We want them included. So we've been a part of that and discussions. But
it's exciting, isn't it? I mean, for the girls or the designers, I should say, because guys and girls are in fashion. It's not just girls. Girls just don't design.
That's
Everyone
right.
designs, right?
Well, yeah, we had some of the best designers come from the Northern Beaches. Radical designers who did amazing things, and business got involved.
So that must be exciting, getting a chance to be a part of that initiative up there in Darwin.
Yeah, we are very grateful for that initiative. We also have a couple of things happening with Jodie's label. There's so many people involved with these projects. There's a lot of stakeholders. As a collective, that's what we were open to, collaborating with a lot of agencies. It's not just us, because the fashion industry used to be like that. It was quite exclusive, very secretive.
So you're opening up the doors to everyone and saying, "Hey, what do you got? Let's have a look. Let's talk."
Yeah, let's talk. And we assess it as a core team. Like, is it a project that we'll get involved in? Because the focus is people and community.
And it's not just Indigenous; it's everyone.
No, it's we part of an African brand that was being highlighting Ankara prints. And she had a movie made of her, which was actually
That's Turkish, right? Ankara?
No, Ankara is actually African.
Okay.
Yes, I know what you're saying. Ankara is the capital of Turkey. Antalya, yeah. Yes. Ankara prints are like hand-screwing prints on like it's usually on a Dutch cotton. Probably talking to textile here now. There was a documentary made about her life as a designer here in Australia, being from Africa. So we were a part of that, and they were nominated for the Virgin Australia Melbourne Fashion Festival Film Awards, which was just in March. We were privileged to be able to attend that. I forget how much we do. I'm not taking away from what.
No, but it must be exciting to have the ability to connect with so many people through what you're doing, and not just looking at one form of fashion or one form of the artistic endeavour someone comes out with, and looking at, especially because your mindset's about repurposing. Seems like you and the girls have really got a handle on looking at the widespread needs that are sustainable.
Well, that's right, because it's sustainability within fashion. Like, what's sustainability? It's actually a mindset. It's a lifestyle. So if you're doing something sustainable fashion, are you doing it in your personal life? That was the big thing for us. Like, sure, we're saving waste as like producing garments or the shows that we run, but are we doing that at home?
It's got to be organic all the way through, right?
Yeah. For me, I don't want, for all the girls, we don't want to just like talk the talk. We want to walk the talk. We know what PR can do in fashion.
It's amazing that once you start that journey, right, and you start walking and talking the same language, that, essentially, I guess that might be how movements happen, or religions formed, or paleo diets come to life,
Yeah.
Because next thing you know, you go, this is me.
Yeah.
This is who I am. Like, I so believe in the 3 words that are the pillars of my company, which is trust, know, and like. Without them, if you don't fit into that category, you don't sit in the hot seat that you're in, or you don't end up, we just don't do business together. I just don't work with people I don't trust.
Yeah.
And it's, it might be narrow-minded of myself. I might miss out on some good paydays occasionally, but if I can't trust the person, what's the point in working with them? Because trust is the foundational aspect of everything.
Yeah. It is. I think relationship is core to everything. You need to have those values based on the relationship you have with the people in your world, right? I just hope for us that we're able to live out our values through our business, and
well, it sounds like where you've got your head right on the financial side of it, and you know that you can't just be an endless tea party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
And beyond that side of it, you got your mind right on what you girls want to see. So, Tez, where do people come and find out more about you?
TheSyndicateGroup.com. We're called The Syndicate because we're like-minded in all our goals and objectives. We are a social enterprise, so I wanted to emphasise like our social objectives, probably priority. I guess I want to speak about that as a business value, just so that you have in mind when people come to speak to me. We've had a lot of commercial brands approach us for various things, and it's like we commit to 3 projects a year for a reason. Your projects need total focus, commitment, and you need the time to allow that to happen. Some brands that have approached us don't have the sustainable or in mind, but that, I think we need to all learn that together. So I'm not excluding people out.
That's good to be inclusive, but also too to know the word no. You just don't fit the mold. Yeah,
that's right. We have people on planet. If I can make it any clearer, if you feel like you can run on a business with those 2 things not your priority for your business, we might find gaps.
Yeah, it won't fit the relationship you need to build, right?
Yeah, but I think we also need to get to know the person. They probably have these aspirations for people on the planet. They just don't know. It's a learning thing, and I just want everyone to feel like we approach everything with like kindness, and not fashion exclusivity, so to speak.
That's a fair trait. Kindness is king, right?
that's a business approach we've always taken. It's sometimes received well and sometimes received like, really? Well, how's that going to commercially drive your business? But that's our values.
And it has. It's it's perpetuated you girls to where you are today. Tereza, I tell you, it's been an absolute pleasure learning more and more about you as a woman, and obviously your ear is close to the ground on the matters that you find very relevant to planet Earth, not just yourself, in a really kind way. And it's just been an absolute pleasure sitting down and connecting with you. Is there anything else you'd like to sort of put forward about the collective?
Thank you to the girls. You've been working hard on all the various projects and disciplines over the last 3 months. We didn't know what was happening. Thank you for your diligence. And we're a bit nervous about going into this digital world, but we're giving it a go. So,
well, there's nothing better than giving it a go, and if you don't, you're never going to know, right?
Yeah, never going to know.
That's one of the greatest secrets on us. There's that great saying, and I think you've lived your life on it. If you're standing on the edge, you're taking up too much space.
Yeah.
Take a leap of faith.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so. I love that. If you're not at that front line on the edge, then you must be too comfortable.
Yeah. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Matt Jai. This has been another edition of the Brand Connect. Here with the wonderful Tereza. It's been an incredible
Thank you, Matt.
conversation. Thank you. One of the greatest things you can do is love yourself and love those around you. And if you can't love those around you or yourself, take a good look at yourself. Spend some time reflecting and find your inner peace, because at the heart center of it all, as Tereza was saying, there is, the ability to love and soften your heart, open and open your mind. Catch you next time on the Brand Connect.
The BK was proudly brought to you by Brand Kinetics, made possible by the support of Paulie B, Future Signage and others. Many thanks to our special guest and you, our loyal followers. Catch you next time on the BK.